What's that? Of course. Yeah.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. It's my pleasure to introduce Jeff Dickhart today as a guest speaker. Jeff is currently the Vice President and General Manager of the Power Die Products business at Wolfspeed. He graduated with BSEE in CPE from Virginia Tech in 1998 and has spent his entire career in the semiconductor industry, mostly in automotive semiconductors. Dickhart started his career at Texas Instruments and held roles in sales, business development, product management, and eventually as the general manager of a $600 million company. In 2019, he joined Wolfspeed, which is a worldwide leader in silicon carbide technology based in Durham, North Carolina. Wolfspeed is leading the industry transition from silicon to silicon carbide. Dickhart leads a business unit that's primarily focused on automotive electrification, and his team is responsible for defining, developing, and releasing bare die power devices that are used in applications such as automotive inverters, EV charging systems, solar inverters, and many other applications. So without a further ado, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So first of all, thanks for inviting me to be here. I'm really excited to be here. Thank you all for your time. Before I get started, do you give quizzes or tests in this class?
Sometimes, yes.
Sometimes, okay. So you're going to have a quiz. Who can tell me something strange about the first slide?
I know.
Shh. There we go. There we go. So take two. I was supposed to be here on February 12th, and I put the slides together before that, of course. And I just noticed this morning when I sent the slides to Kathleen that I never changed the date. So here we are. Snowstorm stopped me from being here, but nevertheless, I'm happy to be here. So as a topic, there's honestly a lot of things I probably could have talked about. And when we get to the Q&A session, I'm certainly happy to talk about semiconductors, automotive electrification, the EV market, whatever's on your mind. But as a topic, I thought what might be interesting was to talk a little bit about what I like to think of as non-traditional career paths in engineering. And I know that when I was a student, there's really only one thing that I thought about doing. And I can tell you that it wasn't what I ended up doing in my career. And it wasn't until I got out of college and into the business world that I really realized how many opportunities are out there for engineers in a variety of different roles and functions. So I thought I would talk about my career backdrop to share maybe what I've learned about some of the opportunities that are out there for you all. And I'll tell you, you've made your first great career decision already, and that's becoming a Hokie. So congratulations on that. I thought the winding road was also appropriate because career paths are typically all not linear, and mine certainly wasn't. And I'll show you that in a few slides here. So more quiz. How many of you want to be engineers? It's not a trick question, I promise. Okay.
You know, Jeff, people go to law school after engineering.
Yeah, some people do, right? I mean, not everybody necessarily wants to be an engineer. Some people are interested in it academically, or they use it as a springboard to a law degree or a business degree or some other profession. So I asked that question just to kind of get the thought process started here a bit. And then how many of you know where you want to be in 5 years? Okay, great. All right, very good. So we'll pause for a moment. Let me introduce myself a little bit. So I grew up in New Jersey. As was mentioned in the introduction, I graduated in '98 with a degree in computer engineering. I chose computer engineering primarily because I was really interested in software. And I remember a cross-country team member of mine, when I was a junior in high school, I told him I was going to major in computer science. And he said, pick computer engineering, you'll get less junk mail. There were tons of computer science programs out there. There weren't a lot of computer engineering programs out there at the time. I thought, okay, that's interesting. I looked at schools that had computer engineering. I found a few and I fell in love with Virginia Tech. The other thing that I did was I co-opted. So while I was in school, I actually worked for Delphi Electronics, which is now part of Borg Warner in the automotive electronics field. So I did 4 semesters during college and actually got to apply the computer engineering and the embedded systems that I was learning about, which was a fantastic experience. My wife is also a Hokie. She graduated from Virginia Tech in '99, founded a nonprofit in Raleigh, North Carolina called the Joel Fund, which she currently runs. We live in Raleigh. We've got 3 kids. My oldest in the 25 jersey here is a sophomore at Virginia Tech in the business school. And my younger 2 are still in high school. As was mentioned, I've been in the semiconductor industry my entire career. Most of that time's been spent in automotive semiconductors specifically. I've moved several times, Dallas, Boston, Raleigh, back to Dallas, back to Raleigh. So I've been around. And during my career, so 27 years, if you do the math, I've held 10 different roles. Actually, I can now increase that to 11 because as of 4 weeks ago, I've got a slightly different role yet again. So 11 different roles or jobs in 27 years in the industry. So that's a little bit about me. Back to the 2 questions that I asked. So how would I have answered those questions back in 1997 when I was attending Engineering Expo, interviewing for jobs, talking to recruiters at companies? I wanted to be a real-time embedded software engineer. And where did I want to be in 5 years? I said I wanted to be an engineering manager. Did I really? I don't know. Sounded like a good answer. It was certainly a good interview answer, right? But that was kind of generally what I thought, right? I really loved real-time embedded systems. I really loved programming. That was what I wanted to do. So what I got to thinking about was, if you think about that, being an engineer and then being an engineering manager, it's a very linear career path. And that's generally, when you think about your future, how you imagine it, right? Each job leads to another. Responsibility grows as you take each job. Promotions, maybe you think about promotions come on a regular cadence. Maybe you'll move up to either a manager or a higher level technical contributor, depending upon what your interest is. And kind of every job kind of leads to the next. But what you don't think about sitting in that chair is company politics, changes in your interests. Your mind starts to open up to other opportunities that are out there the more you get exposed to a particular company or a particular job. Market dynamics that change and may make you have to make a very different decision in your career. Structural leadership changes. These are all things that kind of happen around you that influence what happens to your career. So what actually happened for me was clearly not a linear path. And nowhere on here do you see real-time embedded software engineer, right? So after 2 days of Engineering Expo, my thing was, I walked up to the recruiters at the table. I stuck out my hand. I said, my name is Jeff Dickhart. I want to be a real-time embedded software engineer. What can I do at your company? That was what I did. And 3 times over the course of 2 days, I got asked, would you be interested in doing technical sales? And on the 3rd time that I was finally asked that, I said, you know what? Tell me a little bit about it. And I opened up my mind, right? And by opening up my mind, I opened up a whole new career path for myself that I never saw coming. So it happened to be Texas Instruments, as I mentioned, that was there. And they were actually only recruiting for technical sales at Virginia Tech. They weren't recruiting for chip engineers, design engineers. They were only recruiting for technical sales. They told me a little bit about it. They flew me to Dallas. I interviewed. It seemed like a pretty interesting path, an opportunity to help other engineers solve their problems by using the products that I was responsible for representing. And I gave it a shot. So I started in a sales training program that lasted about a year. Then they deployed me to Boston, and I moved to Boston, where I got to work with so many different companies doing so many different things. It was really very mind-opening, eye-opening, getting exposed to all those companies that were doing things. So I, at one point in time, specialized in telecommunications. I called on Polaroid, if any of you even know who that is anymore. So a lot of different applications that I got to see, and I started to develop some interests. Then eventually I went on to business development, calling on partner companies that were developing software and hardware systems around TI products. And eventually I got my first promotion. So it was actually about 7 years into my career. By this time, I was actually already living in Raleigh, North Carolina. And I got my first promotion. So I became a business development manager. How many times can we put manager in our titles, right? Anyway, this was a phenomenal experience. I really actually loved that job. Another big learning. So back here, I think I had 2 different bosses over about a 3-year period. One of those bosses calls me up and says, you know, Jeff, I've got a product marketing manager opportunity. I think you'd be perfect for it. So up until this point in my career, being a computer engineer, I spent all of my time in digital products, processors, software, really digital systems. TI was starting to shift its focus toward analog products, power semiconductors, mixed signal, data converters. I had an old manager who called me up and said, I've got a job. I think you'd be perfect. I think I said no 4 times. And then he finally, you know, convinced me. And it was a product marketing manager role in the power management division of Texas Instruments. So this was my first opportunity to go outside of digital and into the world of power. And I knew nothing about power, nothing. And so I did that for a couple of years. And then eventually there were reorgs. I think through this time, there might have been 6 different reorgs at the company. I became a product marketing engineer. And there I was actually also in power management, and I was working on products for servers and computer systems, calling on Dell, IBM, and all of the ODMs in Taiwan that manufacture those systems. So I'm now 12 years into my career. I've kind of gone up a little bit, down a little bit. I kind of took a sideways move. I went from digital to power. And I'm basically sitting here going, and I put engineer in quotes because it's a funny thing. Companies always find a way of putting engineers in titles that aren't really engineering. So product marketing engineer, right? Kind of, I don't know. Anyway, I'm sitting here going, boy, you know, I'm learning a lot, but I probably could have done this job 10 years further back in my career. I think I'm ready for the next challenge. So I was kind of at a crossroads. So this is kind of where I want to share a couple lessons. So I kind of had to take a step back and think, what is it that I really want to do? And what is it that I'm really good at? And so I sat and I said, well, what skills have I built? Over the course of these 12 years, what skills have I built? In the beginning, I learned a lot about people. I can tell you, being in sales, boy, I sat across from customers that called me everything under the book, right? Called me an arrogant, you know what? I mean, amazing, right? You guys don't know, you know, products. You're telling me you've got this chip, but I don't have enough volume to use it. I had all kinds of situations that I was put in. So I learned a lot about just dealing with people, sitting on the other side of a table from somebody and letting them vent, kind of knowing how to interact with people. Then when I went into business development, I learned a lot about partnerships, eventually learned a lot about management. I say management very specifically. A lot of people interchange leadership with management. I don't think they're the same thing. I think they're both important, but they're different. So I learned a lot about management in this role. And then eventually went into product development. I wanted to get out of sales, and I wanted to learn what it was like to actually develop and release products. So I said, okay, well, I've got, you know, a lot of different skills here. So what do I do with these? So I wrote it down. and I said, what do I enjoy and what am I good at? And I wrote this, I think 13 years ago, and I still have it. And I still go back to it. I still use it. And you can kind of see what I eventually kind of listed out was the beginnings of a job spec. So that every time an opportunity came along, I could compare that job to my job spec and say, is this something I think I'll be good at? Will I be successful at this? And will I enjoy it? Right? So the boss that I mentioned that had called me for that first product marketing job calls me again and says, Jeff, we've got a job. It's not reporting to me, but we've got a job starting up a new product line inside the company in automotive with projection technology. I think you'd be perfect for it. Can I tell the hiring manager about you? I said, absolutely. I'm looking for something new. This is perfect. Took all my skills that I mentioned, people, partnerships, management, you name it, and took a lateral move to go back to business development, which matched my job spec for a startup business inside the company. A year later, I got promoted to general manager. 6 years after that, I was actually promoted again and asked to lead the largest P&L inside of the division that I worked for. So now along the way, I learned about startup businesses, business strategy development, and P&L management, right? So I built more skills. And then eventually in year 21, I decided to make a leap and change and get back into the power electronics market, which is where I am today. So I like to refer to this as kind of my 3 careers. That first career was kind of those first 12 years, building all those skills in different roles. And then the second career was really kind of developing those skills in business development and P&L management. And then now, of course, I'm a VP and general manager at Wolfspeed. So this was my backdrop, but what did I learn that I can pass on to you? First of all, engineers can do anything, and I mean it. And most companies believe that. You go to a technical company, engineers are doing almost all the roles in the company. Maybe not HR, although some are, right? Maybe not finance, although some are, right? But all of your other functions, sales, marketing, business development, engineering, all those functions, they're being performed by engineers. I mean, obviously, as you all know, famously, many of the CEOs of those companies started out as engineers, right? So especially founder led companies, right? So engineers can do anything. Think big, think broad. You don't even know half of what's out there for you sitting here today. Know what you like to do and write it down. Write it down. Put it in your phone. You know, maybe you don't use pen and paper anymore. I still do. But write it down. Know what you're good at. Write it down. Be deliberate about taking new roles and make sure they match these 2 lists above. So I can tell you, I've said no to a lot of different roles, and a lot of people will give you career advice and say, never say no, right? They'll cut you off. The company will stop asking you. I said no plenty of times. If I didn't think it was going to be a match for me, I said no, right? And I do think that led a lot to my happiness in my jobs. And if you're happy in your role, you're going to do a better job, right? So be deliberate about taking new roles, make sure they match those lists. Be patient, make sure you're constantly learning and building new skills. And then this was a lesson I actually learned kind of late in my career, but keep seeking successes and bigger challenges. Don't take a role just for promotions. I took one role in my career because it was a promotion, where I was kind of looking at it, I was matching it to my job spec, and I was like, yeah, kind of sort of matches, but yeah, I don't know, but it's a promotion and, you know, it's a bigger business. I lasted 11 months and I was done, right? So don't seek promotions, seek successes and bigger challenges. Make sure they're tied to the things that you love to do. Networking and mentorships. I talked about that boss, you know, that called me 2 times. Ultimately, that's what got me a lot of the opportunities, not my resume, you know, not Indeed, not LinkedIn. It was the connections to the people that you meet along the way and really investing the time and the energy into those relationships and networking and mentorships. I had a boss, my very first sales job in Boston, who I learned this from very early in my career. Whenever people came out to Boston from Texas to visit customers with us or whatever it was, folks from the product lines, engineering, marketing would come visit us out in the field. He would take them to dinner, right? He would spend time with them at lunch. And a year later, when he wanted to make a career change to get out of sales and go into marketing, he had about 10 different opportunities because of all those networks and relationships that he had built with people. Last thing I always like to say is people, people, people. At the end of the day, businesses are people, customers are people, the teams you work on are people. So knowing how to interact with people and work with people and understand how people tick, what motivates them, is a huge learning for me. Okay. How we're doing? Pretty good. Okay. This is kind of my shameless plug. The choice, I remember the spreadsheet that I built. So I graduated in 1998, right? Internet boom until 2002. I literally had, I think, 15 job offers when I graduated from Virginia Tech. It was a crazy, crazy time, right? And so I had this nice spreadsheet. What company am I going to go work for? Which of these job offers am I going to take? And, you know, it was everything from automotive electronics to printers to telecommunications gear. A lot of those companies no longer exist. Man, was I lucky that I happened to choose semiconductors. And you know, it's just kind of dumb luck that I did. I can't necessarily say that my spreadsheet spit out this answer, but this is kind of the ride that the semiconductor market's been on, right? And I just, as I think about the 27 years that I've spent in the semiconductor industry, I really think it's like one of the great US industries. And a lot of manufacturing is overseas now, and famously, there's a lot of manufacturing coming back now to the United States. But in terms of the legacy in the industry, the Intels, the Fairchilds, the TIs, the companies based here in the US who have been part of growing this industry over the last decades, I really view it as one of the great US industries. And I think, you know, you all being in an ECE, and of course, with the trend in power electronics right now, you know, my plug is you know, pick an industry that's really core and core to what the future looks like. And for me, that was lucky enough to be semiconductors. And you can see, I mean, I've lost the semiconductor market goes through these crazy cycles, and unfortunately, we're kind of in a down cycle right now, right? But I think I lost my 401k twice through this cycle, right? But it's been a tremendous journey, and it's still fundamentally up and to the right, and it's just been a great ride. So that's kind of my shameless plug for semiconductors, for power electronics specifically. But you know, find what you love and certainly blaze a trail in it. So. That's pretty much all I had from prepared remarks. In terms of questions, like I said, I'm happy to answer any questions, whether it's about my career questions, advice, guidance, automotive, power electronics, whatever, you know, whatever's on your minds. So shoot.
Questions? Let me start.
Yeah.
I liked your slides very much, especially slide number 12, the skill development part of it.
Yeah.
I was running for IEEE president. This came up. Next one.
Which one?
Next one.
This
12,
one?
12.
Oh, 12.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I asked people I was campaigning,
Yeah.
that what can I do as IEEE president? Help us to build our skills on the job.
Yeah.
Because I will remain marketable. Restrictions happen, families changes,
Yes.
all the kind of stuff. That is very, very meaningful.
Yeah.
They do want to on-the-job training.
Yeah.
The problem is the following. I was president of Power Society, PES, sometime back. We wanted to put a job site on our website, job site. You put resumes, pick up. Many companies objected. You're helping us to lose our employees by having to fire their jobs. But that's a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
Which part do you follow?
Yeah.
The company ownership or the people like you at the time?
Yeah, no, so I don't know if I'll directly answer the question, but I can at least tell you my philosophy, right? Ever since I had my first management job, what I always appreciated best of the managers that I've worked for is when they've been willing to have open career conversations with me about what I want to do, what I like to do, independent of the company that I'm currently working for, right? Because if I, as a leader, can mentor and encourage you to help you go where you want to go, even if that means it may not be on my team or in my business or even in my company, you're going to be a better employee for while I have you. And if people see that I'm the type of leader that's developing a culture of people going on to bigger and better things and helping achieve their successes, more people want to work for part of that team.
That's right.
And it becomes this nice cycle. So I don't get too worried necessarily about having open conversations with people about, hey, this might not be the final stop in their careers. I want to focus on how I can help you get better, how I can help you achieve what you want to achieve, and not be so guarded
That's
about
because
where that may end up
you are
being.
a benevolent person. You're a benevolent. That's why you think that way. Not everybody does that.
Yeah. The other interesting thing, what was the first part of what you were saying?
Build skills
Skills.
on the job.
Yeah.
Working.
Yeah.
Maybe
So
evening class,
skills.
maybe go to seminars, workshops.
Yeah. So skills is another thing. So you notice when I wrote my job spec, I actually had software and silicon solutions. And then I said, silicon is not a must. I really loved software. Like I wrote this 12 years into my career. I really loved kind of the software part of it. There was a part of me early in my career that really cared a lot about, I guess, the specific type of product that I was working with as opposed to the skills that were needed in the job. And sometimes I would get hung up. I told you I said no 4 times to that one job. I was getting hung up on, well, I'm not a power expert. Why do I want to work in power, right? I know a lot about digital. I know a lot about software. I want to stay there, right? And so if I go back, digital processors, projection technology, and then back to power management. So I've kind of jumped 3 different times. So what your question kind of triggered with me was fundamentally success in all these things was about skills. Right. It's about the skills you developed and applying those skills to new industries, new applications, new types of products. Not so much about, was I an expert in this or an expert in that? So I think you really focus on the skills and you really focus on, developing the people.
One more comment. Last slide said people.
Yeah.
I like that. I have a new one. Communicate.
Yeah, it's huge.
Engineers do a lot of good work. They cannot say what they do.
Yeah.
Lawyers do the talking for us.
Yeah.
I said, no, I'll do my own talking. I don't need lawyers to speak for.
Yeah, it's huge. Yeah, communication's huge, especially in leadership. Yeah. Richard.
Jeff, I've got 2 for you. One is kind of, I noticed the last 3 bullets you have there, right? They're all related to people and relationships and career path. I particularly like the 3rd one from the bottom. The reason is, this is what I keep telling my students, exactly the similar message along the line, is because I saw typically people goes actually the other way, right? There's more people trying to treat this career thing in the transaction, right? How much I put it in and what promotion I get, that kind of stuff. Not really realizing that you need to actually look for a bigger challenge. It's actually opportunity. It's actually gives you the force to put you in the next round. Now, back to the question particularly is when you look for bigger challenge, right? Obviously, there's bigger chance to fail.
Yeah.
So therefore, my question for you is, can you give one example that when you seek for bigger challenge, you failed? And how did that actually help you recover? Right? Because that's a one on the non-technical. The other one is the technical side is really, in particular for your current role, right? With Wolf Speed, investing in this 10 kV silicon carbide MOSFET for decades, right? Obviously, government did a big part of that. The question is, how would you, as a leader now in the company, look at this bigger bets for the company, but not necessarily actually pays back, or but how do you actually look at where do you invest in the new technology, and hopefully to get the return will become the reality for the future?
Yeah. Whew. There's a lot there. I guess let me start with the failure. So certainly there's lots of little failures along the way, right? If I had to think of maybe a big failure, you know, in the job, I guess it would have been in here, right? I was responsible for bringing a technology from the projection industry into the automotive market. And we knew that wasn't going to be easy. Technology was about 15 years old at the time. The quality that technology was known for was not quite up to what the quality expectations of an automotive application were going to be. So we identified one kind of driving application that was going to lead to the adoption of our technology in automotive, and it was the center console screen. So we're going to use rear projection, just like what you see back here, in a center console dashboard screen. We had so many companies that were working with us on proof of concepts and prototypes that were like, man, this thing is going to be huge, and it's going to grow in 3 years, and it's going to return in the investment 10x. 3 years later, we still had 15 companies tinkering around with it. We were nowhere close to production. We just weren't seeing the milestones that you would want to see to know that this was going to actually make it into a production vehicle on the road. So we'd invested millions of dollars by this point, 3 years of resources. And I had to look at it and say, this thing ain't going, right? So I killed it. At the same time, we were getting pulled by automotive customers to use the technology in a different application. We said, well, let's take the resources and let's pivot over to this other application. That ended up being, you know, a $200 million a year business, right? So I think we would have just kind of, if we hadn't called it, we would have just kind of kept going and going and going and going, and admitting that we had failed and that, yes, we've invested millions of dollars, but continuing in this direction is only going to make it worse. Admitting that we had failed and making a different decision fundamentally changed the outlook of that business. I think you asked a second question about return on investments and how do you know where to target, or what
The technology, so meaning that some sounds great.
Yeah.
I think you know, they're just gonna pay back, but
Yeah.
less.
So I believe if I think about that same story, right? I believe very much in setting milestones, so every ROI, every return on investment analysis that I've seen from any of my teams always shows that every product we do is going to be incredibly successful, and they're all going to make 20 times what we put into them, right? And I've never seen anybody walk in and show a bad business case, right? So how do you differentiate between them? Sometimes you just let them all go and you recognize you're going to swing and miss sometimes, right? Take risk, and then you're going to miss some, but you better hit most of them, right? What I like to look for is the milestones. So if I think back to that example, it's in every market, in every product, there are certain milestones of customer adoption or market adoption that you look for, right? And if you're not seeing those milestones, then at some point you might need to make a different decision. But if you're seeing those milestones, and maybe it's not growing as fast as you want, or it's not meeting the ROI that the team had presented at the time that they developed the product, as long as you're seeing those acceptance milestones, it's good to continue. I had one example back to that same automotive business where it took 4 years before we got our first vehicle into production. From the time we started investing, it was probably more like 7 years, right? But from the time we actually really got the product out, it was about 4 years. Would have been really easy for the company to say, you're done, right? But we were seeing continued milestones of customer adoption. We knew that customer was making progress through their milestones for how they get a vehicle to production. And so we believed it was still a good ROI and still worth continuing to invest. So that's me. I don't, you know, everybody might give you a different opinion to that, but that's what I look for. Yeah.
Can you
Yeah.
talk to us about Wolfspeed?
Yeah.
The type of products that you are working on?
Yeah.
If you can, please talk to us about your current role.
Yep.
How it differs from the previous roles.
Yeah, you bet. All right, so Wolfspeed's one of the leaders in silicon carbide technology. You know, it was founded many years ago by a group of folks out of NC State that were tinkering around with silicon carbide. Eventually, they started a company called Cree that was one of the pioneers and inventors of blue LED. So they actually took the technology first into lighting applications, and along the way kept this kind of small little skunkworks group going for power semiconductors, high voltage power semiconductors. So we are today the world's only pure play silicon carbide manufacturer. We sell devices, MOSFETs and Schottky diodes that range from 650 volts all the way to 15,000 volts. My specific products are responsible for bare die. So these are parts that don't get packaged. These are the actual bare die chips that we sell to other customers who then typically take multiple chips and put them in power module packaging for high voltage, high power applications. So the biggest market that my products go into today is automotive electric vehicles. We're in about 50 different brands of 50 different models of electric vehicles around the world today. China, US, Europe, you name it. Some of the biggest brands that are out there have our chips in it. Publicly, we've announced partnerships that I can talk about with companies like General Motors, Jaguar Land Rover, BorgWarner, who are using our chips and putting those in vehicles on the road today. So that's a little bit about kind of what Wolfspeed is up to. We don't do just bare dies. We also make silicon carbide wafers and sell those wafers to other semiconductor manufacturers that actually compete against my business. Why do we do that? Because fundamentally, the vision of our company is to help convert the industry from silicon to silicon carbide, right? So we sell at almost every stage of our manufacturing process to meet the customer where their capability starts, where our capability ends. We try to meet them somewhere along that path. We also sell packaged products. So we make our own high power, high voltage modules, and we make discrete devices as well that go into a variety of power supply data center applications. AI is a big one right now. The data center needs more and more power. Silicon carbide provides a ton of extra efficiency. So that's, again, a little bit about Wolfspeed. I think what's different about maybe my role versus previous roles, when I joined Wolfspeed 6 years ago, the business that I took over was about $12 million. I had 2 people on the team, and the market opportunity was enormous. Every single car company in the world was calling us to work with us on silicon carbide. So we had to scale and grow that team and the business incredibly fast. So first few years, it was pretty slow, but in the last 4 years, we've basically grown the business 20x over 6 years, and we grew the team 30x, right? So I think what was different and unique about the Wolfspeed experience compared to the previous ones was just the amount, the speed of adoption. you know, if I think back to the first automotive example I gave, it took, you know, we started that investment in probably 2010, 2009. It took 10 years to kind of get to the same thing that we did at Wolfspeed in 4 years, right? So I think that, you know, that's what jumps out at me.
As you've scaled the business that quickly, do you have any advice for the new on how you delegate it, how you manage things with that tremendous growth?
Yeah, so in the beginning, you can kind of add people and keep adding people, but then at some point you've got to put in what I call a framework for scale, right? So that's the structure of the team, that's the leadership roles on the team. And so fundamentally what we did was about 2 years into it, we got to a point where we knew we were going to have to hire fast, and you can't bring that many people into the organization because single managers start to run out of time to be able to spend with each individual. So what we did was we built a framework for scale. You know, I organized the teams into dedicated engineering functions, and underneath each of those, I had specific managers for specific roles, and then those people were able to kind of add and hire more people as they went. For me personally, I delegate almost everything, right? It's kind of my leadership style. I'm not afraid to roll up my sleeves and dig in and help the team. But the way I like to think about it is every opportunity that comes to me is an opportunity for somebody on my team to get experience in some area. And so I'm constantly looking for ways to delegate, but you've got to have the framework in place to be able to do that. Otherwise, you're just overloading too many people. So that was really critical. When you're hiring that many people that quickly, you've got to have good layers of management in place so you can actually add that many people to the team and train them. Otherwise, you just get to a point where you can't actually add any more people because your managers can't. They just can't do it. Yeah.
One beginning, I've worked in product marketing with sales engineers.
Yeah.
Attribute that always struck me is the ability to think on their feet. And
Yeah.
Found that was good training with your early days.
Yeah, without a doubt. Like I said, you get put in every situation you can possibly think of. The other thing you learn is, I think, in business, in the personal world, there's the 3 most powerful worlds. In the business, most powerful words. In the business world, the 3 most powerful words were "I don't know." Right? So you learn you don't always have the answer, and you shouldn't try to make it up. Because the engineer sitting on the other side of the table is pretty smart, and they're going to be able to tell that you don't know what you're talking about. So you say, "I don't know" a lot, and you learn how to think on your feet and kind of how to handle things that you didn't see coming. And that was great training for everything that I did from there on out, right? Being a people leader, people manager, that's the hard stuff. Deciding which products to do, that's a little bit easier. But when somebody comes into your office with a problem or a personnel problem, that's the hard stuff. So I learned a lot about people in sales, and I think that formed a foundation. The other thing I guess I'll say is, as I think back, I think having a lot of different roles early in my career was actually really important. It gave me kind of different opportunities to build different skills and to learn different things. I would never recommend that anybody like job hop a lot. As I said, don't like job hop for promotions, but taking on different things and different experiences is actually really important to your development, especially early in your career. And then later in your career, the longer you stay in a role, what you often find is the more satisfying it is, because you start to get really good at it. And then you start to see all the work you've put in, and you get to see the results of all the work you've put in. But early in your career, kind of gathering all those little experiences is really important.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Compare with your cases, you graduate with bachelor degree and join the sales related roles. But like for me, as firstly, I'm an international student, not that good at oral. And also I already invest bachelor degree, master degree, PhD degree into technologies.
Yeah.
I think it's easier for me to persuade people believe I would be a good guy for engineer or technical expert. What if because of today, your presentation, I feel a little bit interested in like a role of yours. If you are recruiting people, a student like me come to you, what could be the dimension or key point I need to improve to persuade you I could handle that role?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I can tell you what I think what people saw. I mentioned the job fair that I went to, and 3 times people asked me if I wanted to be in technical sales. Clear communication, right? Direct. And then on my resume that I handed to them after I shook their hand, I had leadership experience. So I'd been in a fraternity. I was president of the fraternity. I'd done alumni relations. I was in clubs. I co-opted. So I had experience presenting. So I think what you'd look for would depend upon the job. For sales specifically, it was, it was those signs that I had kind of leadership, interacted with people, organizational experience that would benefit me in that type of role, right? So if you've got interests in things outside engineering, try to find opportunities to build those skills or get involved with organizations or clubs or leadership opportunities that give you the ability to go see if those are things you're good at and if those are things you like to do.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Are you still scaling up? Are you hiring now?
No. No, unfortunately, we're not at the moment. The semiconductor market's in a pretty tough spot these days, but that doesn't mean I'm opposed to connecting with anybody, by the way, for what it's worth, just because we're not hiring at the moment. But yeah.
We have Zoom questions, Kathleen. Can you ask them, Chris, if they have any questions? Any more questions from the room?
I see them mostly ask questions.
That's right.
How many people own an electric vehicle? Okay. You like them?
I like it. Only exception is I charged almost full on Sunday going to Roanoke.
Okay.
It shows 320 miles capacity. It's a big battery. So I thought I go to Roanoke easily. But then I drove about 200 miles. It's only 40 miles left. 320 and 40 is big, not 200.
Yeah. Yeah.
I realized what was happening. Limit was 70. The passenger car could go to 80. You drain the battery much faster.
Yeah.
There's not
Yeah.
defined.
Air conditioning on,
And I left
temperature
the AC
outside.
off,
Yeah.
AC off, light off on
Yeah.
purpose.
Yeah.
And realized I was passing many cars. So if you are driving for this speed cut limit at 70 and don't touch it, then it's okay.
Yeah.
You
Some
get
are
the
better.
mileage.
Yeah. Some are better about that than others. But yeah. Now I was just curious. So yeah.
How do you see the market, like the AI boom and the EV charging? This, how do you see things going in the next 5 years?
I mean, EVs are here to stay, right? Adoption is slow in the United States, but adoption worldwide is growing incredibly fast. China, over half of vehicles that are sold are electric, not full electric, but either hybrid, plug-in, not hybrid, plug-in hybrid, or battery electric, over half.
Are you facing big competition in China?
Yeah, there's a lot of competition in the market right now for sure, but there's also a lot of car companies. China is a pretty wild market at the moment. A lot of new OEMs getting started, having success. A lot of new business models.
Do you have people on the ground in China?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
They're buying your chips.
Yeah,
no,
you bet.
no tariff problem.
Yeah. Yeah, no, business is okay. Business is okay from that perspective. Yeah. So, but China, I mean, it's really amazing, actually, some of the innovation that's coming out of the EV companies. There's a company called NIO that has a battery swap technology.
I drove a Neo, excellent
Yeah,
car.
you drive into a little kind of car wash looking
Right.
thing, and it pulls the battery right out of the bottom of your car, puts a fully charged one back in. Takes about 3 minutes. So you have a fully charged battery in 3 minutes. They sell you the car without the cost of the battery. So if the car is $28,000, the battery costs 10, they sell you the car for $18,000, and then you pay a monthly subscription for whatever size battery you want. So if you want to drive to Roanoke and you need a bigger battery, that month you subscribe to the larger battery. There's some pretty innovative stuff that's happening, right? So I think EVs are here to stay. Adoption is slow in the US, but picking up. General Motors and others are doing a lot around more affordable EVs, which is going to help. But at the end of the day, for me anyway, I've always been a believer. It's not about government regulations. It's not about tariffs. It's about providing great products, right? If people buy an EV and they love it, they'll keep buying more EVs. You got to provide good products, right? And little by little, we're seeing some really, really good products now finally available in the US. So, yeah.
Kathleen? No?
Nothing? All right.
We are almost,
Okay. Well,
5
look,
o'clock.
I appreciate the time. Hopefully, I've helped a little bit. If you want to connect offline or afterwards, don't be shy. You can find me on LinkedIn. Like I said, think big, think broad. Probably most of you will become engineers, and because you're Hokies, you'll become great engineers. But if anybody has an inkling that they might want to be something different, don't be afraid to jump in and try it. So
I have a slogan: get big or get lost.
Thank you. I
Thank you very
appreciate it.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.